everyone, and welcome to the sixth episode of the Women in Nautica podcast. I am super excited today because we have Jemma Lampkin from AkzoNobel. And Jemma, welcome on the Women in Nautica podcast. We are very proud and honored to have you on air today with us.
Thank you so much, Anna. Really honored to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you. So, how was your week so far? How are you doing?
Yeah, pretty good. We're at the end of the first quarter of the year, so it's been flying by, and first quarter in yacht is normally pretty busy for us. So looking forward to maybe things calming down a bit in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I can imagine. The soft start of the beginning of the year is already way behind us, and everyone is quite in a rush nowadays. But
Yeah,
to
indeed.
start, could you tell us a bit about your educational background? So, for the listeners who don't know you, and just to explain a bit how it led you to the current position you're in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually studied psychology, and it was my dream, and I had in mind for a long time to become a clinical psychologist. Now, you can argue whether I've ended up in that role by accident or not, working in our lovely industry. But yeah, as I said, I studied psychology, and where I was studying in New York, I had quite a empirical and science-based approach to psychology. So when I came out of studies, I was working in more psychological science, experimental research, and was a little bit unhappy with research in academia. I felt like I wasn't contributing in the best way that I could. And so I ended up in market research to try and apply a research framework more to the business environment before I would go on to do my PhD in psychology. And then, yeah, eventually decided to get off the psychology track, really loved working in market research and in business. So I did that for a number of years, working in consulting and different market research projects. And eventually that led me to AkzoNobel, where I started in the specialty coatings business to lead the market research and market intelligence section for specialty coatings. And then began my career journey at AkzoNobel, and the rest is history, as they say.
Wow, quite impressive. And I also think that psychology was a great start because we need this as a base, I think, in almost every industry and also within any leadership role. I think it's very useful to have a psychology background.
Yeah, I think especially because of the way that it was approached when I studied. We had a very strong research based, also a clinical based, so more on the people side. And thirdly, a teaching base. And I think these three elements have really helped me later in my career, although of course I decided not to pursue psychology.
Yeah. But in general, interdisciplinarity is always something that ends up being useful. And also within your career path, you switched industries too. So from becoming the segment manager and then the regional sales manager for AkzoNobel Aerospace. After that, you became the yacht commercial director. So can you tell us maybe what are some similarities and differences you see between these two industries?
Sure. So I think if we look purely from a coatings perspective, which is of course what AkzoNobel does with paints and coatings, um, both industries are pretty similar in that there's a pretty high visual component in terms of the demand of the coating. So in aviation and in aerospace, of course, you have airlines that want to show their brand image, and you see the paint when you get on the plane as a passenger. And in yacht, we also have that visual aesthetic component that is so important. Although, of course, that's more on the personal side, right? You get to the freedom of expression to paint your boat or your yacht in the way that you like. And both are also similar in that our coatings and our paints need to protect. So airplanes go through really harsh conditions all over the world, right? Hot desert to freezing Arctic. And same with yachts and boats, they sail around the world. And so I think another similarity is just the technical requirement of what we're working in terms of protection. I always say I'm really blessed to have worked in both sectors within AkzoNobel because both are full of very, very passionate people. So it's not uncommon that some of our colleagues in aerospace, I mean, they literally, they just jump out of their seat when they see a plane. They're so excited. And I think we have the same level of passion in yacht for boating. So there is a lot of overlap. What I would say, maybe you asked about the differences. Aerospace is a very tightly regulated industry. And so Airbus, Boeing, the OEMs really control a lot in terms of quality and what is or isn't acceptable from basically everyone who contributes to the industry. And I think in yacht, we are a little bit, it's more flexible, let's say, subject to interpretation or the preference of the yard or the owner. So, yeah, it's just a little bit more personal and flexible if I compare it to the regulations in aviation.
I understand, but I definitely think it will be interesting for the listeners to see the similarities within the two industries because that's not something you take for granted or take even into account that both yachts and planes are going to certain conditions where the coatings need to have a specific type of protection for the outside effects. So, yeah, very, very interesting to hear. And also, AkzoNobel being a global corporation, it's not only about different industries, but also multiple sub-brands within your network. So, can you maybe explain us a bit how the brands are synchronized?
Sure. So I think we can talk about AkzoNobel and then we can talk about yacht. And so Akzo, of course, it's quite a large company. We have about 32,000 people, and there's a lot of different industries, as you said, and also brands. So we're active in the decorative paints market, which is something, consumers are likely to interact with. But we have powder coatings, we have wood, we have metal, we have automotive, we have marine protective and yacht, which of course I'm part of. And over the years, we've acquired a lot of different companies and brands and tried to bring them all under the AkzoNobel umbrella. And as you can imagine, when you acquire lots of different companies and different brands, they tend to come with their own processes, their own ERP systems, and their own capabilities, the people that work for them. And so I think we've done a lot of work over the years to try and centralize as much as possible. So bringing the core processes and guidelines together, still allowing for some variation in the brands, but trying to centralize as much as possible because yeah, I think at some point we had maybe 30 different ERP systems. And as you can imagine, that just makes things pretty complex. In yacht, we have tried to centralize the brands under AkzoNobel yacht coatings and then give the guidelines for the individual brands so that they still can have their own identity, live their own life, so to speak, but trying to keep some consistency in the overall umbrella.
Yeah, I see. And I can understand the complexity of it all because a company is just a company from the outside. But yes, once you dig in, you see differences from ERP systems, CRM systems, maybe warehouse management systems as well. So it's very complex. Would you then say that you mirrored some of the organizational structure within the sub-brands as well?
Yeah, so I would say we use a similar structure, and I stress the word similar. It's not the same, but there are similarities across the different business units, especially in the more performance coatings businesses like powder, like marine protective and yacht. The decorative business operates a little bit differently. One of the things that makes yacht and aerospace, for that matter, a little bit different is that we do follow a global structure for our business, whereas most of our other businesses in AkzoNobel are organized regionally. So for the most part, we are similar, but there are a couple of differences like that.
I see. And if we're looking at the purchasing processes these sub-brands go through or the sales processes, are there any strategies which are following, let's say, a template for either the purchasing process or the sales process?
Yeah, so I would say purchasing tends to be one of the core processes that we have centralized. So that uses a more general overall structure. When it comes to sales and also the marketing strategies, I think, when you're working on strategy, you use typically the same components and core makeup of your strategy, right? So some of the tools that you might be familiar with, like 3 Cs and segmentation, so on and so forth. So the underlying structure overlaps, but then your actual growth initiatives, the factors that will allow you to win in a market when it comes to your sales or your marketing approach will be very different. So, as I mentioned, for Yacht, we have several different brands. All Grip, which is very well known on the professional side. We have International, or Interlux as it's called in the US. And then we have our Seahawk brand, which we acquired in 2020. And each of these brands has, first of all, their own history. So All Grip is a little bit over 50 years now, whereas International has been around for over 140 years, Seahawk being much younger. And each brand has kind of their own personality, their own customer base. The way that we think about the brand and the sales strategy is very different. So it goes back to the point that I made before, where you want to bring everything into one overall cohesive umbrella, but still respect the fact that these brands have their own identity, and that requires different strategies.
Yes, and also maybe keeping the identities and the way they do business is an important factor to retain some of the customers which have been with the brand for ages before it got acquired. But this also brings us a bit to the marketing segment, which you already mentioned. Something that's important in today's strategies and which larger corporations are considering, of course, is having a unified media kit or even tone of voice, which is being used when customers or even in B2B relations are being approached in social media, corporate communications. So, do you have anything in the segment of a unified media kit or how to unify branding voice?
Yeah, we do. So each of the brands that I mentioned has their own sort of brand story and tone of voice with some guidelines for each. And then we still do, I mentioned, work quite a bit on this AkzoNobel yacht coatings portfolio because I'm very biased, but I think one of the strengths of AkzoNobel in yacht is that we have really a solution and a product and a service in some ways for any part of the boat, top side, bottom side, interior, etc. And really any type of customer, so professional to your DIY consumer. So we've tried to bring them together. We have a brand campaign called That Feeling, which has been running for a period of time. And that tries to pull together these 3 highly individualistic brands into one campaign, which essentially is about the love and passion for the incredible industry that we're in.
Yeah, so to say the least, there is a lot of effort to keep things going and to keep them synchronized and also create a movement that it's pushing everything forward, right?
Exactly. And it's hard work, right? That's why we have enough to do, that's for sure.
Yeah, well, it's always better to have more than less, at least in my perspective. And when it comes to the brand, it's of course global, but some of the sub brands you already mentioned, they're in specific regions. So, do you think that having a region specific network has some of its benefits?
Yeah, I do. So I mentioned earlier that most of the businesses in AkzoNobel are organized regionally. And yacht and aerospace, for that matter, it's a bit of the exception. And I do think we need the global structure because of the nature of the industry, right? Yacht is very global, and we want, if you have a super yacht customer in Europe who happens to bring the yacht over to another part of the world, we want to be able to provide them the same level of service no matter where they are. I think that's very important. That being said, from a product perspective, there are different regulations in each part of the world. That's also becoming increasingly the case. And so you might find that just by nature of country regulations, we have to offer local variations of some products in terms of how they're formulated. And also, what you see in our business is that our distribution and our third party channel partners are very localized. And I think that's also pretty important. Most of our best partners are local, who can offer the best support in the local language to the country specific variations. So I think it's like anything, it's about striking the balance between having the global framework, trying to leverage that as best you can, but still understanding that a lot of the business requires local specificity.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned regulations because it's not only about safety regulations, but recently sustainability regulations. Although at the moment we're facing some differences and drawbacks from set goals due to certain situations on the globe, but I think sustainability is still quite important. So, can you maybe share with us within the sustainability segment? How are you reducing carbon emissions from your value chain? And are there any sustainable materials you're using?
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I agree. Sustainability is very important, despite the extensive discussion that I think is taking place now around the world. So, AXO was one of the first paints and coatings companies to commit to a carbon reduction ambition. We have a 50% reduction ambition by 2030 for the full value chain. And I would say we tend to focus around four key areas. So, energy transition, process efficiency, reduced solvent emissions, and also circular solutions. So, let me break that down maybe a little bit more tangibly. So, one of the things that we focus on, just very simply being a manufacturing company, is how are we powering our facilities, right? Are we using renewable energy, and can we be as efficient as possible when we just look at our manufacturing sites and plants? Then another big part of it is what's going into our products. So just from a pure recipe, raw material perspective, can we use more sustainable solutions, whether it's, a lower VOC product, something that's water-based, etc. But also not just in terms of the materials, but do the products, or could the products cut out process steps for applicators or the customers that use them? And none of this is specific to yacht, right? We do a lot of it in yacht coatings, but it's across the company. But I think a couple of examples of more process oriented products in yacht. For example, we launched a spray filler a couple of years ago that really changes the whole approach of filling and fairing for the applicator. So cutting out steps, minimizing waste. And these are some of the more tangible things that we're working on when it comes to cutting out carbon emissions.
Interesting and also very noble and important because as a large corporation, you do have the resources and also the means to make an impact in this segment. And I think that's very important.
Yeah, like I said, I agree. It is extremely important and definitely still a lot more work to do. And especially, I should have mentioned, but we are a pretty traditional industry in yacht. So sometimes it takes longer than I would like to convince customers to change to a more sustainable solution. So definitely still a lot of work to do on that front.
Yes, and circularity is not only a trend, it's something that really needs to set up into place. So, not just to be a buzzword, but circular economy to become the new economy and just to raise awareness, but also create products that are going to generate revenue, so that circular economy does have a substantial background behind the word economy, so that it's not just based on projects, but actually on products that work and products that help society, and also products that help corporations, but are good for the environment as well.
Absolutely.
And then sustainability is also a part of teamwork and awareness. So, do you have any practices you're using in-house for education on sustainability within your teams?
So I think the first thing that is important is that we do have an in-house sustainability team. So that really helps a lot. And that's a central team that works across all of AkzoNobel. And that team has been, as you can imagine, growing over the last few years. And then we also have people working on sustainability within each business unit and sometimes even within a segment of the market. So first of all, I just think before you even get to the teamwork and trying to raise awareness, you have to dedicate some resources to this topic. Otherwise, it just doesn't move quickly enough. As I said, we're lucky that we have this in-house team, and they focus a lot on quarterly webinars, offering e-learning across the organization, and then also collaborating with the different business units to try and train our sales or our marketing or our technical teams about the latest sustainability topics and also educating them. So how do you, for example, understand our product carbon footprints? How do you interpret or communicate that technical data? Because it is quite technical. So I think aside from in a way that's very formal and structured in terms of webinars and e-learnings, but I think just making it a regular part of the conversation when you talk about strategy, when you talk about product development, when you talk about your sales strategies. And it's really important that it's kind of always part of the conversation, because that also helps us get better at moving it forward.
Great. And I love that you're doing e-learning. Personally, I think it's a very flexible and very cool way to educate yourself because it's mostly self-paced. You can do it either from your laptop or your phone. And if it's like a lecture you're listening to, you can listen to it on your commute to work. And that's very convenient in today's busy times. But also, sustainability is recently very much linked to health and safety protocols. So, do you engage workers in any of these protocols? Can you share some best practices?
Yeah, so health and safety, again, being a manufacturing company, is a huge part of what we do. I mentioned we have about 32,000 employees, and I mean, the large majority are in our manufacturing sites where you could probably imagine it's really critical. It can be life or death in some cases to keep people safe and protected. So at least as long as I've been a part of AkzoNobel for 10 years, the focus safety has always been extremely high. And a lot of that is obviously focused on in-house safety, what's happening in the plants, how do you avoid accidents, how do you prevent injuries and foster a safety mindset. And I have to say, I notice it every now and then. So yesterday I was in our headquarters, which is not a manufacturing site. It's really just an office. And I had neglected to put the desk lever back tucked into my desk, and a colleague walked by and corrected it because someone might bump into it. And it's a small thing, but that is the mindset and the culture that is prevalent in the company. So if someone sees something that's unsafe, even if it's small, they stop it. And I think that comes from years and years of instilling that mindset in the company. And then I think the more, not necessarily more important, but the equally important part is, are we training our customers and our channel partners also on these best practices? So we have yacht paint application centers, we call them YPACs. And during those training courses that we offer at these centers, we also cover best practices for what is the right personal protection equipment to wear? How do you safely apply our products? It is paint, it is a coating. So there are certain precautions that you need to take as an applicator to keep yourself safe. So I said equally important. I'm still going to say more important is that we share our knowledge and our practices of safety, not only with ourselves, but also with the market.
And it's so nice to hear that you have such a caring culture that also focuses a lot on education because, yes, it's not only about in-house, but when things are great in-house, it's really easy to reflect all the well-being outside and to have a great relationship towards the customers as well. And you mentioned something which brings me to the next question, where we're now a bit zooming out from the sustainability part but zooming in again on the regional specificity. So when it comes to the global spread of the brand, you mentioned the yacht paint application centers, and you recently opened one in the APAC region. So can you share a bit about this experience and how it was for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was one of my favorite moments of last year, actually, getting to attend the grand opening of our YPAC, which opened in Australia. And so we started our YPACs probably about 18 years ago. And the first opened actually in Cocoa Beach, Florida. And since we've had it open, we've trained thousands of professionals there, people in the industry. It's just something they really know about, right? This 3-day course that we offer for applicators is usually a mix of classroom and hands-on training as well. And we use our YPACs not just for training the market, but also to test and apply our own products to see how they might perform when we bring them out of the laboratory environment where they're developed and into the real world, which is also, I think, crucial. So over the years, because Cocoa Beach was so successful, we opened other YPACs all over the world. We have several in Europe, but we were still missing Asia Pacific. And okay, I have quite a soft spot for Asia, having lived there for 3 years. And although I love Asia, I can tell you it's very far away. So if you want to bring an applicator to a YPAC, before we had the one in Australia, you would have to send them to Europe or to the US, which is obviously not very practical for the customer to travel so far. So it was a dream for several years to open one closer to the Asia Pacific market and to be able to offer the kind of training that we like to provide, not just in Australia, but to other countries. Like we have customers coming from China, Vietnam, etc. So it was a dream to start this. We finally opened it last year, and we've had the first few training courses there already. And I'm just looking forward to seeing how it evolves over the coming year.
Great. And it sounds that YPAC centers are basically the spots that allow for great product education, awareness, and application across the whole value chain you have from manufacturer to end user, right?
Yeah, I think there's product knowledge that you can train on, but a lot of it is application. And application includes everything from the product itself, but also to how you prepare, the safety element we talked about already. And that's part of our mission as a yacht coatings brand, is to really help applicators do better with our products. That's the goal.
So you're doing a lot from this perspective, but also the marketing perspective to improve the boating industry and the support to your customers. Where does technology play a part in this for AkzoNobel?
I love this question because it's also a topic I'm really passionate about. I mentioned before that the industry has been a little bit traditional. So one of the things we've worked on a lot over the last couple of years is to add some investments in new technology and try to push forward a bit. So I can just touch on a couple of them. One of the things that we've added in our YPACs is virtual reality training. So normally, if you want to train someone on spraying paint or spraying a coating, you have to use real paint, a real spray gun. It takes material, there is waste, and you also don't necessarily see the immediate feedback from the application. So with the virtual reality, you can see it is a real spray gun. It feels like a gun. It's just that you're not applying actual paint, but you can see, did you apply too much product? Is the layer thickness even? You can also even measure with data the cost of the product that you're applying per square meter. And you would think, okay, this is a big, complicated virtual reality unit. Actually, they're quite mobile, so you can kind of bring them around like a small suitcase if you wanted, even to a site of a builder for more localized training. So I'm really excited about this development because I think, yeah, just will, again, it's another tool to help people improve application. And also on the more technical side, we added virtual goggles. So we call them Expert Eye. And you can think of it a bit like almost FaceTime, but our technical team can support any customer anywhere in the world almost instantly. You can use these Expert Eye goggles, but you can also use your phone. So it allows people who might be having trouble or have a question to be immediately connected with our team wherever they are in the world without having to travel. So that's something I'm really excited about as well. And then maybe the last thing that I would mention is our 3D color visualizer, which we created for the Allgrip brand, also launched last year, where that allows the user to select among tens of thousands of colors in our database for different boat types. And they can visualize using this software different colors for the superstructure or for the underwater section, all shown in a 3D model with different angles and light. And we developed that entirely in-house. So I think also just pretty proud of that. And yeah, it's just another tool using technology, using digital to try and move things forward a bit.
Congratulations, and thank you for sharing these practices. I think that through technology, we can also bring a bit of game and play into usefulness. And I think that's what also benefits everyone from using it, because in some occasions, like the goggles, it just triggers maybe the part of the brain that used to play as a child, or at least resemble something of it. So we enjoy actually the experience of using tools like this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now moving a bit away from the corporate world and moving on to you. So to your boating habits specifically, are you a boater yourself, Gemma?
Well, I should say I'm lucky enough to have several friends who have boats. So I'm always raising my hand to go out with them, but probably smart enough to know not to own a boat.
Understandable. And can you share maybe a favorite boating destinations where your friends take you or where you would like to be taken to?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm living in the Netherlands now, where if you consider that there are fair weather boaters, we don't have a lot of fair weather boating days here in the Netherlands. So most of my preferred locations are still outside of the country. And I have very fond memories. I spent several years spending the summers in Maine in the United States. And Maine has a really, I would say it's almost magical boating community, people who are just really passionate about sailing and being out on the water. And yeah, Maine will always be my favorite place to go boating and then have a lobster roll after.
Sounds lovely, especially the lobster roll, but also the passionate community, because those type of people are the ones who are driving the industry forward. And last but not least, so we always end our sessions with the almost same questions, and that is that do you have any tips and tricks for networking and young business professionals, but young people in general who want to either start or succeed within this industry?
That's also a great question. I think, okay, the very tactical suggestion is that one thing I've noticed about the yacht industry, maybe more than others, is the popularity of different trade groups. So most of certainly our sales and our technical team members are active and very present in different marine trade groups and organizations. So I would definitely suggest just get involved in whatever your local group is. That's a great way to meet others who share the same passion for the industry. The other thing that I would say is that yacht is still, as I mentioned, in my view, pretty traditional. So I think being out there face to face and just talking to people in real life is really important. There are some industries that I'm familiar with that are much more about, online networking and things like that. But I do think being out face to face in yacht and marine is pretty important. And maybe the last thing that I would say about it is just being open and not being afraid to reach out and extend an olive branch. So actually, Anna, I was thinking that you and I got connected from LinkedIn, and you just reached out to me and then we started talking. And I think that's a great example of just when someone approaches you, being open to receive the approach, and also on the flip side, daring to reach out to others and create those connections in the industry, because I think that is part of what makes our industry very special, is the close connections and relationships with like-minded people.
I agree. And I love all the examples which you gave. And also, thank you for accepting the olive branch. And I think that this last question will be a great inspiration for everyone listening, and also great support to anyone who just might need the last motivational push. So, thank you so much for sharing that. With that, we have reached the end of this episode. I once again want to thank you for the time devoted and all the great insights you shared with us today. And of course, for everyone listening, you can find Gemma on LinkedIn. And if you want to follow us, so Women in Nautica at Instagram, LinkedIn, listen to this episode either on Spotify or YouTube. And of course, subscribe to our newsletter to get the freshest insights first. Thank you, Gemma. Bye.
Thank you, Anna. Pleasure.